Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Mindset Monday, where we take the best teachings on mindset, motivation, and leadership and apply them to your life. This helps you get past the past and grow forward into abundance. Let's get into it. All right, here we go. It's JJ Conway. I want to welcome you back to Building Wealth Together. Today we are continuing our series called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. It's based on the book of the same name of Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. And even though this book was specifically written to law enforcement, I feel very strongly that many of my entrepreneurial clients come to me with these same symptoms. Now, let me tell you a little bit, for those of you who are new to this series, how I came in contact with this book and why I am doing this today. I was invited to begin a series of classes with the Shreveport Police Citizens Academy. It was very eye-opening, and I can't wait to share with you some of the things that I recorded or that I saw or that I learned in the class. I've shared some of them, but there were many that were eye-opening. There's one that I can't wait to get the videos for because it shows how we as the public can see things from one perspective, and we think we know what the cop did or didn't do, that they should or shouldn't have done. But when you see the video from a different angle, then you realize what the cop saw in the moment and why they acted the way they did. Now, you and I both know there are a lot of incidences of excessive force against people of color in our nation, and has been for some time, not just in the police, but the entirety of our bureaucracy, our corporations, our military, our schools. Okay. Anybody who's listening to my podcast who does not believe that's an actual thing, you probably aren't going to be listening to my podcast for long, because you're going to get tired of hearing about it from time to time. All right. But the thing is, when I saw those videos that the cops showed, and they showed this angle, and that angle that made the cop look like they were in the wrong, and then they showed the fourth angle, which actually happened to be one of the body cams that people are crying out for now, right? And you saw how this cop legit thought they were being threatened. And I said, well, we do have a problem. You will never get me to say we don't have a problem until one day we don't have a problem. But there are some problems that are made worse by selective editing, selective soundbiting, and not showing the full picture. And so for me, that was one of the most eye-opening things about the Citizens Police Academy. The other thing that really struck me was when we talked about the effect of stress. We talked about the effects of stress and the body's response to stress and the amount of training law enforcement goes into to lower the impact of stress on their bodies. Because every time you pull somebody over, it's a life or death situation. And I know for myself, when it was my turn to be the one riding around and we pulled somebody over and I had to approach the car, I didn't even realize I was doing it, y'all. I had my hand on my weapon the whole time. Like, we're so fast to criticize. We are so fast to criticize. But you know, sometimes when you're in a situation, your body's going to express the fear. Okay. And so we walked through the stress, and as we were going through the stress response and the symptoms, and we talked about this book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, I realized that so many of my clients, they themselves are on this hypervigilance roller coaster. And we may not have day jobs that are as threatening as being in law enforcement. I'm not trying to say that being an entrepreneur is the same level of life or death threat as being in law enforcement. Okay. I'm not trying to say even being in the military, sometimes there were times where we were under threat, but a lot of people in the military are pretty much working day jobs. They do have higher stress levels than most regular jobs that I've seen, but there's a effect. And whether your life is being threatened or you just feel like your life is being threatened, the effect is the same. And that's why I'm covering this book, because many of my clients are exhibiting these effects. And so we can learn about this hypervigilance roller coaster, the long-term effects of hypervigilance, and how to re-wicker our lives so that we can survive and thrive despite the stress. And we can also learn how to apply these tactics and techniques to others. So last time we went through some very real symptoms that there's a hypervigilance issue. And for those of you who are new to the series, I encourage you to go back to Building Wealth Together and download the last 4 episodes, because I think this is part 5. The last 4 episodes of Mindset Monday, where we talked about this, and you will learn how we get in this hypervigilant state. It's actually kind of a desirable state because it makes us feel powerful and alert and like we can do anything, all that adrenaline, right? But that our body, for every 8 to 12 hours we're in that state, our body needs 12 to 24 hours to recover. But most of us don't have that luxury, and most of us don't even know we need it. And many of us like being in the alert, hypervigilant state, so we actually rush to get back to it. And then we talked about some signs that you might be on this roller coaster, but not necessarily giving yourself enough time to recover in between sessions, such as the desire for socialization when you get home, right? Social isolation when you get home, not wanting to talk to people who aren't either a cop if you're a cop, or military if you're military, or any of those kinds of things. Reduced interaction with your non-police friends or your non-entrepreneur friends. Procrastination and decision making that's not related to work. Like, you don't want to make any decisions. And I used to tell my husband, I didn't even realize I was exhibiting this, y'all. I used to tell my husband, I'm a man all day at work. I make decisions like a man, and I have to act like a man, and I have to be a man all day at work. I don't want to come home and be a man. I just want to relax. Oh, goodness. And there are other more insidious ones, such as the thrill of infidelity. Because it puts you in a hypervigilant state. The I used to syndrome, where everything that's fun in your life is preceded by used to. I used to do this. I used to do that, right? These are the symptoms. These are the signs that there's a problem. The biggest issue with these symptoms, especially the I used to syndrome, is that before someone becomes a cop or goes into the military or becomes an entrepreneur, they're generally well enough balanced. They have friends, hobbies, values, interests, beliefs, sports, things that they care about. They invest time and energy into numerous aspects of their lives, such as spirituality, culture, ethnicity, friends, family, goals, right? And after the I used to syndrome, we find that our sense of self is not coming from a mixture of these goals, but only from the vocational role. So only from being a cop, only from being in the military, only from being an entrepreneur. All the other supporting dimensions or interests in the officer's life have basically disappeared. Now, they might still pay lip service to the other dimensions. Like I said last week, a lot of us if you asked us our priorities, we would say God and then family, but very few of us actually prioritize God and family if left to our own devices. Our checkbook and our calendar says otherwise until we make a concerted effort to actually put those things first in our life, okay? So instead of saying I work as a cop, you find people that will say I am a cop. What do you do for a living? It's now I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO. It is a small difference, but saying I am a cop or I am an entrepreneur, it defines the essential core of the sense of self. And it can transform a positive sense of pride in the professional role into an overshadowing of the other essential aspects of the officer's life and identity or sense of self. Same for the entrepreneur. In fact, what this does is it creates significant under-identification with other life roles that we actually need to balance ourselves out. And I found this in my military career, that I was really trying to go gung-ho with the military career and figuring all the other pieces will fall into place. We say a lot of things. We say things like kids are resilient, they'll be okay. It's more important to say, I am a mother or father. I am a husband or wife. I am a friend. Instead of letting cliches guide us into more and more unhealthy, unbalanced behaviors, let's take a look at the whole person and figure out who's in control. It may not be us anymore. It may be a damaged sense of self. Now, an interesting discussion that Dr. Gilmartin goes into is a discussion of psychological dysfunction. He says it has two components: high demands and low control. Interesting. The high demands of the job coupled with a low degree of control that you feel that you have in your individual life. So if the loss of control is combined with high demands that you have to handle, this degree of imbalance or stress can be extremely high. And as predictability, autonomy, and control of sense of self decreases in your life, sense of the emotional vulnerability, susceptibility, and risk increase. So as police officers decrease the number of dimensions or roles defining their lives and defining their sense of self, they will become increasingly invested only in the police role, and they increase their level of emotional vulnerability. If the job becomes your life and you don't control your job, then you don't control your life. And how many of us feel like we don't control our jobs? How many of us feel like, even those of us who are entrepreneurs, how many of us feel like we don't control our businesses? We are at the whim of our mentors or at the whim of our customers, and we don't have much control at all. Is that how you feel? What do you have control over? I mean, let's be real. We're going to all say we have control of our integrity, our professionalism, and how well we do our jobs, how well we market, how well we interact. But there's so many things that are outside of our control with the police role, with the entrepreneur role, with the wife or mother role, with the 9-to-5 role, the CEO role, the military role. The more and more you find yourself being controlled by someone else, the more vulnerable you become to losing your sense of self. We may not even realize it, but what happens is we become vulnerable, susceptible. We continue feeling at risk, even if we don't realize it, right? And eventually we become paranoid because someone at any moment can change the dynamic of our future. Police officers who've been unknowingly experiencing the hypervigilant roller coaster, they become engaged in the psychological conflict that stems from over-identification with a role they do not control. And again, I'm bringing this to you not to say that entrepreneurship is like police work, but to say that I see a lot of us in that role. A lot of us are playing that role. We're entrepreneurs, but we have these same stresses from our job and our bureaucracy and our feeling of a lack of control that the cops feel in theirs. And the sad thing as I continue reading is, the guy's basically like, look, you're just going to have to get over it. Everybody's going to get done wrong by their agency. That is the nature of agencies. And maybe it's the nature of organizations. I'm not sure. But everybody is going to get messed over. They're going to, get a discipline, letter of reprimand, or days off without pay when they really shouldn't have, or they're going to get transferred involuntarily when they're doing a good job, or they didn't get whatever it was, the transfer, the promotion, the new car that they deserved, okay? And it's true. You didn't. You legit didn't get what you deserve. You legit got something you didn't deserve. And the thing is he's saying you got to understand this if you're going to be a cop. Well, I think back to all the people that I knew in the military and how many and to many of the entrepreneurs that I know that don't understand that this is basically how the world works. Now, I'm not going to get all religious and metaphysical on you, but I'm a very firm believer that we live in a sinful and fallen world and bad things happen to good people, okay? In the military, I remember trying to clear my name for something, and one of the commanders was like, well, you should just admit that you did it. And I was like, I'm not going to admit that I did it. I didn't do it. He's like, look, as a commander, we're always signing off that we acknowledge doing something that we didn't really do. And we're always taking the blame for doing stuff that we didn't do. We're always taking the hit for doing stuff that we didn't do. It's just part of the gauntlet. And I was like, well, then I guess I'm not going to make a very good commander then. And I never did get selected for command. So maybe that conversation was part of why, right? But it's unfortunate that this reality exists. However, this reality doesn't have to define us. Even if you've been done wrong by your agency, and I imagine that many of us have. In fact, most of the entrepreneurs I come in contact with became entrepreneurs, if not because of some family motivating issue, like, their kids got sick and they needed to give them full-time care or something like that. It's usually because they were not treated well at their agency, they were let go unjustly, or they had discrimination or some other unjust thing happen. That's what pushed them into becoming entrepreneurs, right? The thing is we have to understand that if we allow ourselves to get trapped in this endless conflict with our agency, we stop looking for solutions to the problem, and we become more of looking for we become more insistent on coping mechanisms which we believe are at our disposal but actually don't work. And this is why I really resonated with this, because it's so similar to the military. The equal opportunity and the inspector general and all those things that we have as opportunities in the military to make a difference and to stand up for what's right, they're all actually really there to protect the commander, not to protect you. And so you file grievances, you file lawsuits, you do this, you do that, and nothing changes. Well, it wasn't going to change. The change is not going to come from the agency. The agency that's been around for so long, it cares more about self-preservation than actually getting the job done. The change has to come in you. The change has to come in disassociating yourself from the role of cop, entrepreneur, military member, and actually having a sense of self that's made up of all of those other factors. Being one-dimensional is how we become when we're so totally invested in a role we don't control. And the sad part is the ones who do have the control are the ones that have the least amount, the ones that we least trust, because they've shown that they don't really care. I'm paraphrasing what he says here, but we have to move away from victim mentality, and we have to do what we can to have control. And the biggest area that you can start exerting control right now is in your personal life. Remember, victims have no control. You don't want to play the role of victim. And you may decide you're going to stay in this job, and you can't really get rid of the upper part of the hypervigilance biological roller coaster, right? The ups and the downs. You don't get rid of the ups, but you understand what's happening in the downs, and you make the changes you need to make so that the downs balance the ups. Now, I'm not meaning to imply in any way that you shouldn't just do whatever the agency says and just be sheep and expect unfair treatment and just roll with it and let it happen, okay? If a grievance needs to be filed, file it. If a lawsuit needs to be filed, file it. I'm just saying, don't become consumed by it. Don't let the jerks at your job live rent-free in your head, okay? And I learned that the hard way myself. I learned that the hard way, and that's a whole nother story we can talk about sometime later. But we don't want to focus on the things we can't control. That's what victims do. Victims focus on what they do not control. Survivors focus on what they do control. We want to move away from strategies that are based on victim-based thinking, such as rationalizing it as your own lack of commitment and dedication, or trying to justify this or justifying that, or saying, well, if they don't care, why should I? These are the kinds of things that you do when you're in victim-based thinking. You could start you could start coasting and not caring. In fact, I had one of the saddest posts came up in my Facebook feed today. It was from a couple years ago, and it said, this is the first time in 21 years in the Air Force that I felt like doing a good job just didn't matter. It didn't matter how hard I worked or how good a job I did. People were still going to find any reason to nitpick and tear me down. So why bother? And I didn't make that post public. I'm not sure why I even typed it, but years later, I look back at that and I'm so glad that I captured that emotion, because I think that's where a lot of us are. We get so disillusioned and so distracted, and then we decide, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to be my own boss and I'm not going to have to deal with this stuff anymore. But what do? We bring that old victim energy into our entrepreneur energy. And guess what? We don't get any better results. That's why when we finish this series, I want to start talking for our Mindset Mondays. We're going to start talking about time-tested success strategies that will help you push past victim mentality and into survivor mentality, into control over the things you can control. Instead of focusing on the things you can't control, now it's time to focus on the things you can control. So let me just summarize real quickly the victim attributes that many of us have taken on without even realizing that this has become a part of our psyche, okay? One of the first things, and we've talked about this at length today, was the merging of personal and professional roles, so that we begin to see ourselves as that professional role, and we begin to neglect all the other roles around us. Another victim attribute is a hypersensitivity to change. So change happens and nobody likes change, okay? None of us really like change, okay? But in this case, we're so hypersensitive to change that all change is a personal assault. Everything that changes in our life is because somebody is out to get you. And I've had somebody who was like this. I have a friend whose mom is so hypersensitive to things that as you drive down the street, if somebody cuts her off, it's the CIA trying to kill her. It's not just somebody who's in a rush to get to work and they're late because we all got stuck behind a train. It's a personal attack against her. And she really, really believes that, all right? Another victim attribute is rigidity and inflexibility. And we also find that victims have this ever-present feeling of threat from the organization. Now, it doesn't mean that the threat doesn't exist. The threat may indeed exist, but we're going to see later that a victim doesn't always feel always feels that looming over their head, but a survivor finds ways to disassociate that threat with their longevity and their livelihood, because that role in that organization no longer defines them. Woo! All right, this is getting good, y'all. Another victim attribute is belief that one is being controlled or persecuted by the agency, along with the need to retaliate against management hierarchy for perceived wrongs. Now, again, retaliation is not the same as taking appropriate action. If somebody is doing wrong, that needs to be reported. I once had a supervisor that was throwing things at people and screaming at people and pulling them into closed offices to scream and scream and scream and scream at them for no reason but because she could get away with it. I had an ethical duty to report her, okay? But that's not the same as feeling like I need to retaliate against her, all right? Another victim attribute, social isolation from others except a few true believers. Isn't this interesting? Because everybody else is out to get you. Give that some thought when you fall into these modes, okay? Grandiose sense of self-importance. I'm one of the best cops in this department. How many times have we thought that about ourselves in our agencies or in our organizations? They're treating me like this, but I'm the best person they have. If I walk away, the whole thing will crumble. Well, sometimes that's true, especially for those of us who do too much. But what I discovered is no matter how good and awesome I was, and no matter how much they really couldn't do without me, when I walked away, they would find a way. Usually, they would replace my volunteer efforts with something they pay for, which would then be something they valued more because they were paying for it. So go figure that one, okay? But the victim mentality is, oh, I'm one of the best you got. You can't afford to lose me. But instead of making the healthy choice to find another organization, they wallow in that with the puffed up, I don't want to say vanity, but the puffed up inflated self-worth that comes from thinking that you're the best in that organization. But it's only a hollow self-worth. And I hope I'm getting that through to you today. I hope you're seeing that this may make you feel better and it may feel like a great coping strategy, but it's actually putting you further and further and further away from achieving your goals. So, what do we do about it? How do we move from victim mentality to survivor mentality? Well, one thing that we can do about it, and I encourage you to invite as many of your friends as you can to our series that's going to start next week on Time-Tested Success series, because one of the best things that we can do is practice aggressive personal time management and goal setting. Okay? So the victim orientation doesn't feel like they have control. The survivor orientation feels like they do control. The victim orientation focuses on the fact that they have no control over their on-duty time. The job pretty much dictates what the days off and work schedules are going to be like. And they combine that feeling with, I have no control over my off-duty personal time. The job is just taken over. Whereas the survivor decides, I need to be in charge of my daily scheduling of personal time to every extent possible. Survivors, unlike victims, have a clear sense of personal time control. Survivors develop and continually use a specific and practical technique of personal time management, a strategy that permits them to harness the available time in their personal lives to accomplish whatever goals they choose to pursue. So the development and use of a specific personal time management technique is very important for two reasons. One, your work isn't 24/7. And the victim mindset thinks that time is out of their control and feels like the job is just taken over. Okay? And sometimes it feels like a personal life is an unnecessary luxury. But that's not true. A personal life is what keeps us balanced against the high intensity of the work. The second reason we've really got to learn how to have aggressive time control or being proactive in our view of our personal time is because this biological hypervigilance roller coaster and jobs that put us in that roller coaster, they kind of rob us of spontaneity and enthusiasm after the workday has ended. So like you come home from work each day, you ride the magic chair that lets you zone out, right? And you think that you're having some personal time, but it's actually not really self-directed. And you spend those few hours zoning out in front of the TV, letting life pass you by. And you're almost acting like a passive victim of whatever information, entertainment, or nonsense the world is giving you. This time spent in that magic chair, zoning out, is actually the beginning of a passive orientation towards personal time management. It doesn't take any planning. It doesn't take any goal setting. It doesn't take grabbing control of your personal time. It doesn't take anything. It is the basic no-brainer. You just click the remote control and check out. But that's not how you begin to live a fulfilling life. You've got to switch over from being reactive like this to being proactive. Okay? A reactive orientation is essential for street survival, and a reactive orientation can definitely help you in the entrepreneur world, okay? But it's not going to help you survive emotionally the hypervigilance biological roller coaster. So we have to be very careful to schedule the time. Now, I realize that if you find yourself on this hypervigilance biological roller coaster, the last thing you want to do when you get home is actually make any decisions. And that's why it's important to schedule these things in and take the decision making out of the equation until you become so accustomed to making the time for what you want to do that it becomes second nature and it becomes something that you no longer wish to get rid of or to shirk or to skip. You know, this is a lot like my daily walk. In fact, I love my daily walk now. I go about 3 miles in the morning and then I come back and do the work that I need to do. And it's gotten to a point where I know the next level up in my fitness is weights. And so when I first introduced the weights again, for those of you who don't know, I had a really bad car accident. So for a few years, I couldn't do anything high impact. My only exercise was walking and yoga. And now I'm back to weight training again. but I discovered how peaceful and stress reducing and just overall beneficial. It loosens up my body. I mean, walking has just been a miracle drug for me, that 3 miles in the morning. And it also is a time where I download some of my best ideas for classes and content. So I really cherish that time. But I also knew I needed to introduce weights into my schedule, and I just didn't have time to do an hour of weights and 3 miles of walking every single morning. I would love to get to that point. That's part of my goal. But until then, I had to make the conscious decision not to walk, but to do weights. My walking had become so ingrained into me, I did not want anybody turning off that time. And so now sometimes I'll walk 1.5 miles or 2 miles and then do the weights because I can squeeze that time in. But it has to become making time for yourself and scheduling your personal time has to become so ingrained in you that you don't want to give it up for anything. And that's when you know you have switched to proactive mode. Now, survivors are empowered people. They know what they run. They know what they run each day in their lives, and they actually want to go forth and run it. Victims, on the other hand, have a sense of being wronged, and they focus in on retribution or retaliation against those they see as the party that victimized them. But survivors have a very different orientation toward the priorities in life. Although many law enforcement officers would profess that they love their husband or wife or children, it'd be very interesting to see how much time they invest each day in the people they profess to love. Again, we're coming back to this checkbook and calendar thing. We say one thing over here, but we are doing something completely different with our lives and with our time. And let me tell you today, failure to make a choice is a choice. When you come home and you veg out in front of the magic chair, in front of that TV, or you zone out on Facebook, and you neglect the other facets of your personality and of your family and of your life, you are making a choice. You are making a choice. And you feel like you're being brain dead and you're just kind of recuperating, but you are actually choosing a passive life over the life you dream of. So again, we're going to dig more into the strategies for success in our time-tested success strategies that's coming up after we finish this out. So we're going to start that next week. But just to kind of give you some things, I've talked about a few proactive things we can do, but one key foundation is physical fitness. Physical fitness makes you able to handle so much more. It not only helps reduce depression, it also helps reduce blood pressure. It helps reduce the impact of sugar in your system. It helps you unlock your creativity because it helps calm you down. So problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, all of those things are enhanced with a daily walk. In fact, I'm so thankful that a year or two ago, I came across a training, and I don't even remember who gave it to me, but it was basically a training that was like, walking is so powerful that the next time you have a big meeting and you feel tired, go for a quick walk instead of trying to get a quick cat nap. I have introduced that to my life, and I have found it to be amazingly effective. Okay, so you definitely want to have a good 30, 40 minutes of aerobic activity every day if possible. And of course, we're all going to say we don't have time for that, but I'm telling you right now, you don't have time not to take charge of your time. Okay, you got to make the decision to survive. Not just survive out in the streets, not just survive in the boardroom, not just survive in the military, not just survive the mommy car line. Oh my goodness, talk about stress inducing. Whew. But to survive, to be the best you can possibly be, so that 20, 30, 40 years from now, you will still have a legacy. You will still have a life. You will still be a whole person and not just a shell of your former self. Dr. Gilmartin says that to be the best law enforcement officer one can be is a very, very important thing to the survivor. But so is being the best mother, the best father, the best husband, the best wife, the best golfer, the best fly fisherman, the best little league coach, the best scout leader. I encourage you to look for ways that you can begin to take back your life. I'm JJ Conway. Thank you so much for listening to this series. Don't forget to click the link in the show notes so you can get your own copy of this book. Even if you're not in law enforcement, I think many of my clients will find themselves resonating in every single page. Y'all take care and be blessed. Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.